Hi, welcome to AI Trust Talks. I'm your host, Emma Johnson, and I'm excited to have you here. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we live, work, and connect, but with great power comes great responsibility. That's why this podcast exists, to deep dive into the critical conversations about AI safety, ethics, and responsible use. Every episode will explore the real-world challenges and opportunities AI brings, from helping business owners and corporate leaders make better decisions, to empowering data scientists to create responsible solutions, to guiding parents on how AI impacts their children's safety. This podcast is for anyone who cares about building a future we can all trust. So whether you're here to learn, debate, or just stay ahead of the curve, I invite you to join me on this journey as we shape the future of AI together. This is AI Trust Talks, where we build trust in technology, one conversation at a time. Today I'm honoured to be joined by Jessica Smith, an Australian Paralympian, disability advocate, author, and global thought leader in inclusion and accessibility. Born without her left arm, Jessica has transformed personal adversity into a mission to challenge perceptions around disability, body image, and mental health. She's represented Australia on the world stage, authored children's books, and now advises governments and organisations on inclusive design and leadership. Jessica has also engaged with cutting-edge assistive technologies, including AI-powered prosthetics, making her uniquely positioned to discuss the promises and pitfalls of AI from a lived experience perspective. In today's episode, we will deep dive into how Jessica is using AI assistive technology to conduct daily activities, how AI erased her disability, how her children have handled her disability, and how she is educating more children on inclusivity. So I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I'm really keen for you to tell your story and where it all started on your journey.
I am thrilled to be here, so thank you for having me. I think we have to go right back to the beginning. I was born missing my left arm, and that was in the early 80s. The world looked at disability very much through a medical lens. So I was broken, disformed, disfigured, and the medical professionals and sort of the adults in my life wanted to put me back together. And so I was actually fitted with a prosthetic limb at the age of 18 months because, the doctors told my mum and dad that it would provide the best start to life for me. And I think what people failed to understand in that time was that the way I was born was perfect for me, and adjusting to technology and training my brain into thinking that I had two hands was actually really difficult. And it led to a pretty nasty accident that happened in the kitchen when I was 2 years old. I reached up using my prosthetic, which again, you have to remember the technology back then is nothing like the technology we have today. So there was no sensors. I couldn't detect or feel heat. And I'd accidentally knocked a freshly boiled kettle from the kitchen counter. And as I looked up, boiling water spilled down onto me. So I have third-degree burns across 15% of my body. And beyond that, there's a lot of trauma around that. And thankfully, I don't remember a lot of the specifics, but I've grown up in a world where at every turn I was told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough, pretty enough, whatever it might be, because of the fact that I have a disability and that I look so different. And so I guess my entire childhood and youth was trying to navigate and understand my own identity. And I was very lucky that I had parents who cultivated an environment for me where they never allowed me to feel sorry for myself. They knew I was born into a world where I would have to adapt and I would have to find my own way of doing things. And I used a prosthesis until I was about 8 years old, so even after that accident. But I found that it was becoming more of a hindrance than anything that was assisting me. And so then I sort of left it behind. And it's only been in the last couple of years that I've gravitated back towards technology after seeing the evolution of assistive technology, but also seeing the social evolution a part of that as well, the conversations around disability inclusion, and understanding that now is the right time for me to sort of come back into that space because it's more socially accepted.
It's such a beautiful story of where you've come from, and I can certainly tell when we watch the banter you've got with your brother about it's you don't just accept
Yeah.
the
I,
norm and
I think my brothers as well, I have 3 younger brothers, and it's very interesting now looking back on the way they were trying to make sense of it as well. So they created a lot of storytelling around what had happened to me because they were trying to also navigate their identity with their sister having a disability. And so, they told everyone that I was attacked by a shark and there were explosions, all this stuff. And it's funny because that was their way of dealing with what that meant to them. And so I've heard literally every joke, every slur possible, thanks to my brothers. But I think that also allowed me to build up a resilience, knowing that I was going to receive that at some point in society. And they were kind of buffering that. But it's funny because my brothers, if anyone else said to me what they say to me, they would be very protective. So, but it's the relationship that we've been able to form. And I'm grateful for that, definitely.
yeah, we always love our siblings that build that resilience
Exactly.
for us. That's amazing. And tell me a bit about the assistive technology you're using now. So you've been fitted with a Covey Nexus bionic hand, I think we
Yes.
call it. So do you want to tell us a bit about that and how it gets updated with advancing technology?
So this is, as you rightly said, the Covey hand, and essentially the way in which the assistive technology is working is that all of my grip patterns and the memory of the different movements that I make is basically uploaded to the cloud, and so it's able to then have a more responsive interaction when I'm using the hand. However, it's myeloelectric, which means that I know it's going to make a sound. So as I use it, it's not AI in the way that I think the general population think of AI. I'm moving this through muscle movement. So it's my muscles moving. Yes, my brain is obviously telling the muscles to move in my residual limb that then activate the sensors, sending the signal to the computer, which changes the grips. But what the assistive technology and that combination with AI is able to do is to be more responsive and to have the memory of those movements to make it more efficient. And so the more I use it, the more compatible we become. So it's kind of like I'm reliant on the technology is reliant on me, and you create the usage that is more, I guess, in line with my day-to-day tasks. But it's been a journey, I will have to admit, because I was born this way. It's not as easy of a transition as perhaps someone who loses their limb later in life because they have the neural pathways, they have the muscle memory. So for me, it's been quite challenging and frustrating at times. But again, the more I lean into it and the more I use it, the more responsive it is and the more reactive to the things that I'm doing day to day.
And how often do you find yourself using it now?
It's becoming every day, but it's more about training myself to be comfortable with it. So even little things like being able to drink from a cup, the spatial awareness was something that I wasn't used to. So I'm getting used to the technology, but it's the weight, and it's probably things that people don't really think of, but knowing that I'm not used to having 2 hands. So everything I'm doing now, I'm essentially doing for the first time. So I've got to learn as if I was like a young child, but also knowing that the neural pathways are not the same as somebody with 2 hands or arms. And so it's been challenging, but the more I use it, and that has probably been the biggest thing. There's been some times where I've just put it aside and said, I don't need it. I can do everything without it. And I'm probably faster without using it. However, there's also a really important element of me knowing that there's a responsibility that I have, especially with the platform that I have, to be able to showcase what this technology can do, especially for younger children, especially for people who, like I said, might lose their limb later in life. And so if I can share my journey, then it allows other people to see themselves and to be able to sort of go on that journey with me, perhaps before they're able to make the decision of whether or not it would be suitable for them.
Very cool. And I love how you do step out, not just for yourself, but for the community that do follow you and watch your own journey. It's beautiful. So how has it actually helped you? And what are you finding that you could do now that you may not have been able to do before?
That's a really good question because I think, again, I can do pretty much everything. But what it has been is an incredible journey with learning how to do things for the first time. So writing with my left hand and drinking from a cup and cutting up vegetables. It's those seemingly very simple tasks, those day-to-day tasks that are often taken for granted, but have the biggest impact. And for me, I have 3 young children, having that also part of the conversation and showing them what it can do. But it's a challenge for me. And so I think a lot of people are waiting for a groundbreaking response about what I can do with their technology. But for me, it's those really simple tasks that I've never actually been able to do. And, driving and having a bit more of the control and the mobility and, even the movements that I'm doing now, learning that even the slightest muscle responses that I give are activating. And I think it's more that learning and challenging myself at 40 years old to be able to say this is something that, is so powerful. But yeah, to never underestimate the very simple tasks and how just being able to pick up a cup and maybe to do that slowly and for something that's a bit more fragile. At the beginning, it was quite rough. Because I wasn't used to the speed and the force and the power, but I've had to learn how to train my muscles to have more control of that. And as a result, it becomes more responsive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember seeing you like put on makeup for the first time with your left hand.
Yeah. So exactly, like it's that being able to activate all those areas of the brain, because a lot of people wouldn't even be able to do that with their less dominant hand. And so now that I'm able to train my left side to do intricate things like applying mascara has been profound, because a lot of my friends are, I couldn't even do that with my other hand, And so that's what's been so fascinating and so interesting for me, is that journey of learning. But also it does make you quite vulnerable as well. And that frustration is real because I can take it off and do it also without it. So why do I need this technology? And for me, it's a bit of everything, in the sense that, like, the movements I'm doing now, knowing that it's not just about me, and that everything I do is an opportunity to educate other people, not just people who need this technology, but everybody else as to why it's so important.
The general public
Yeah.
and keeping that inclusion going. So you've mentioned your children, and you've mentioned before they kind of call you half human, half robot. How has it been for them to adapt to see their mum start using this kind of technology?
They've been fascinated, and I think that is also part of why I was so willing to try, because initially I thought this could be quite overwhelming and potentially quite scary. My children are young, they're 9, 7 and 5, and certainly my youngest, it took him a lot longer to sort of understand that it wasn't just a game or, a prop. It was something that was now becoming part of me if I chose for that to be how my day started. And what's been brilliant, as you said, is the children's response, my own children, but also other kids. And I do a lot of school visits, a lot of community visits, because what I've realized is that if I had shown this technology maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think there would have been a lot more apprehension, because socially we weren't ready for it. But now, to see the excitement when I walk into a school and people are like, oh my God, that is so cool. And to know that then that's a conversation that they're having with my own children, as opposed to, oh, your mum's a little bit different. She's only got one arm. And so that was also a big part of me wanting to be able to proudly showcase this technology, and to not hide it, and to not cover it with silicone, covers that are matching my skin. I wanted it to be a statement where people were allowed to be curious and to ask questions, because I think that the more we can talk about something, the more it demystifies things. But the beautiful thing that's happening now is technology and disability are sort of in this conversation parallel, and that's never really happened before.
Yeah. And you mentioned all the work you're doing at schools with your book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what drove you to write Just Jessica books?
Yeah, so I have 3 children's books. And again, becoming a mum, I realized that there was still such a lack of diversity in the books that I was seeing on the bookcases and the bookshelves and in the libraries. And when I was growing up, I never had a character that looked like me. I never felt represented. If you think back to any book you've ever read or movie you've ever watched, typically the villain has some sort of physical disability or deformity, something to make them different. They have a hook hand, or they have, grotesque scarring. And so as a child, I was trying to understand, well, that's me, but it's also not me. And I don't want that to be the narrative of my life, but it certainly was. And so how do I create a solution where my own children are able to learn about stories that represent characters who they see in everyday life, but also to extend that to children everywhere. And so the books are about a little girl with one arm as the main character on her first day at school, her first swimming event, and learning to play an instrument, which are all moments in any child's life. But for children to be able to now have access to a story that is a little bit different, but also very normal in the sense that this is just a girl with one arm and it doesn't define the story. It's not about disability. It's about friendship, belonging. It's about challenges. It's about making sure that we understand diversity and we respect one another. And so the books have been incredible to help teachers, to help parents to be able to have those conversations. Because one of the biggest questions I'm asked is, what do I say to my child when they say, Mom or Dad, that lady's only got one arm?
Yeah.
And the common response is that we shush our children and we try to pull them away because we are fearful that we're going to offend or upset somebody. But it's such a powerful learning moment for everyone when we just acknowledge and validate what our child says and sees. So yes, that lady does have one hand. And that's it. We don't have to add any more context around that unless our child asks. So it's leading from what our children are curious of and allowing them to know that it's completely normal to see someone with a disability, and it's okay to respectfully ask questions because we want to understand a little bit more. And so that's what the books are, hopefully being used for as well, to sort of be a resource for everyone to have a conversation around something that for so long has been shrouded in so much stigma.
Yeah, it certainly does help, those continuous conversations with our children, just to make sure that we're getting the right messaging out there about how everyone is different, and just to accept and appreciate that diversity of the world and the inclusion that we can all bring. So what are some of features or design choices in the AI-powered tools that you've got that you really think truly reflect inclusive thinking?
In terms of this specific hand, it's the sensory interaction with the external environment. So the fact that, and as AI continues to evolve, obviously the technology in these hands evolves, but having the sensors and the cameras with the external environment, not just with me as the end user. And what that means is essentially the accident that I had as a child could have been prevented by this technology, being able to respond quickly to environments that they know that it's not, safe. And so for me, that has been the most profound thing, but also the fact that it can be accessed remotely and updated. And so anything that I want to do, any gestures, I've visited a few schools where they've asked to show certain gestures and it wasn't programmed to do that. So and the engineers were very excited to be able to do, rude gestures, which I don't show and I won't show. But that's another thing where the children are then part of that conversation around the technology. And, it's funny, and you need to allow that sense of fun and curiosity so that kids want to understand, they want to learn, and they want to know that this sort of technology is helping, but it's also creating those important conversations.
Yeah, which just are just so important. I want to move to some of the challenges and ethical considerations that you've faced with AI. So you've recently encountered an instance where AI systems failed to accommodate or represent what we should be representing in the diverse and inclusive world. Do you want to tell us a bit about that situation?
Yeah, so as I've been using this technology, it's allowed me to be curious about all AI. And I was just talking to ChatGPT, and obviously the work that I do is around disability inclusion. So just wanting to understand what it knows, what sort of information it can give back. And it started with the AI images. Every time I put in an image or asked for an image, it would only be from sort of like the headshot, And I thought, this is really interesting. I need to delve a little bit further. And so with very specific prompts and by uploading full body length photos of myself, I said, can you generate another image? And it wasn't able to do it. I would get images back where I would have two arms. Even with specific prompting, like, no, I don't have a left arm. Can you please reflect that in the image? It would then generate images where there was some sort of device, I wouldn't even say a prosthesis, even though I hadn't suggested that. And then I would go back and say, no, I don't want a prosthesis. I just want to be who I am, and I'm missing my arm and I'm uploading photos. So why is this so difficult for you? And ChatGPT and a few other AI platforms that I was using came back and said, we we don't know what to do. And you've highlighted a really important issue that there's not enough representation. And I kind of challenged and I was like, but you're gathering this information from what's already available. Surely there is enough information available to represent the vast, beautiful diversity of disability. And it kept coming back and saying no. And then I think on the very last image, I even had a prosthetic leg. So I was like, okay, I've really confused things now. But what it identified was we still have such a long way to go. And we have a profound opportunity right now to literally change the narrative and use AI to help steer the conversation around diversity and inclusion. What an amazing opportunity to literally look through the lens of disability rather than try to go back and change everything. And I think that we have a small window to be able to make sure that's done correctly now. But we all know that, there's been a few issues with AI in terms of identification and that accurate representation. But it made me feel a little bit sad that there wasn't enough data or information that already existed. I wasn't surprised, but I just thought, why can't we just get this right? We're inputting all the data. Let's input all the data that reflects this beautiful tapestry of humanity. Why can't we do that now? And I think that if we do, and if we start to really focus on that, then we will have a proper reflection. And imagine what that could do from a social perspective for humanity when AI is saying, well, no, we got it right, rather than saying we're still trying to figure it out from, a community level right now, regardless of technology.
It's bad enough that humans were getting it wrong for so long. And then now the AI is just going to accentuate these biases that we get. I remember just after I'd had my total hip replacement, I prompted for an image, not on that platform, but on another one. And it just came back with an old man, like an 80-year-old man who was sitting there because, someone of my age probably shouldn't have a hip replacement. But of course, I've needed it since I was a child. So you're right, like that representation of data is just not there. And if it is there, what are we doing to correct it?
Exactly.
And just present it the right way and make sure we get it right. And anyone that is working in the AI space needs to take that responsibility to make sure that they're checking it, making sure the data is representative.
Absolutely. And this is where the importance of ethics comes into it, and making sure that end users or people who do represent minority groups, people with disability, are involved in every stage of that process. Like I said at the beginning, I'm reliant on the technology, but the technology is also reliant on me. So how do we make sure that there is safety around all of that? There's good governance, and that there are policies to protect the data, to protect the people, to ensure that not only are we getting it right, but that there's longevity in this to ensure that level of safety as well.
Yeah, it is really important. And so do you feel that people with disabilities are adequately represented in the development and design? So I know you've played a really big role in the COVI's journey as well. Do you think there are those opportunities out there, and are people with disabilities getting involved?
The opportunities are there, and I think more and more organisations are starting to realise that to develop this sort of technology, you need to have the people who you're designing for to be part of that team, from thought, conception, design, and then obviously implementation. But I think we could be doing a lot better. I think, again, this is why I always come back to the social understanding of it, because unless we all understand the importance of designing through the lens of disability, we're going to continually come back to try and fix what we thought we were creating in the right platform, but based on assumptions rather than based on asking those questions and working with people with disability. So I think there's a lot of room to ensure that people with disability are invited to the table, are employed to create technology that at the end of the day benefits them. But it's also the realization that a lot of the assistive technology that you and I and everybody else uses was initially created to restore the dignity and independence of people living with disability anyway, And so just, I think, to have that understanding and to be able to say, oh, we actually benefit from technology that is benefiting people with disability. So maybe if we shift our perspective and realize that the designing for everyone benefits us on an individual level, like how could it not? And I think there's just still a little bit of a disconnect on that level.
And what are some of the biggest accessibility challenges you see in the mainstream AI applications we've got today?
I think, again, it comes down to not including people with disability in their entire process. You're still going to have inaccurate representation. And because of that, when you don't have diverse teams representing diverse backgrounds, you fail to be able to design and create for those particular people and groups of the population. And if we don't do that now, it's going to negatively impact whatever those AI creations are to help us in the future. So we have to get it right. It's imperative because it's evolving so rapidly that my fear is we get to a point where you can't go back and change it. And then all of a sudden we have neglected yet again another huge cohort of the population when we didn't have to. So I think it's about going right back to basics and ensuring that disability is included at every stage, because the challenges then are, if I'm not included, if I'm not represented, well, how can I add my voice to this? I also don't want to continually be talking about it either and have that as the main focus. I want to be able to access AI technology that helps me in other areas of my life. But if I keep coming back to the fact that my story and my existence isn't reflected, that then deters my relationship with the technology, but also how I'm able to use it in other areas of my life. So I feel that everyone does have a responsibility to ensure that we get it right now.
Yeah, agreed. We're starting to see some of the recruitment tools coming through to do assessments while you're going through applying for jobs and things like that. But just making sure there's always that out where someone can say, look, I can't do this because of a particular disability or something like that, whether it be dyslexia or someone that can't answer those gamification questions faster.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, but that's what I mean. If you can have that already embedded into the system and to have that level of flexibility and opportunity to make those accommodations when needed, it's very important. But we need that regardless of the technology or not.
Yeah.
So I think that it's something that we need to ensure is a conversation in every room across every industry and sector.
Yeah. And just the last thing we want to do is widen that gap that's already there today
Exactly.
and making it worse. Yeah. So let's go to some kind of broader reflections. As someone who advises organizations worldwide, not just here in the UAE, how do you see AI influencing global conversations around disability and inclusion?
I think it's really exciting. And I think that a lot of the technology already exists. And that's what I was saying before. Perhaps people just don't know that there are so many AI tools that are assisting people with disability. Everything from, being able to transcribe to screen readers. There's so many wonderful tools. And I think there needs to be the same level of excitement to be met so that it's something that not only translates into the technology, but it feels good and it makes sense. And like I said, we've been using these tools for a very long time. Just letting people know that what we're able to do with making sure no one is left behind is using this technology to fill those gaps, to not, as you said, to not make those gaps bigger, but let's use the technology that already exists and the ones that we're developing to ensure that that's what's happening. But, there's so many wonderful devices, from prosthetic limbs to, glasses that allow people with vision impairments to be able to process information. Like I said, the screen readers, there's so much in terms of for people with hearing impairments, people who are blind and have the AI accessibility embedded into their walking canes. Like, it's just fascinating. But again, what needs to happen is for the general population to be excited about that and to be welcoming of that, because the infrastructure can exist, the technology can exist, but if we don't have an understanding of how important that is from a human level, then it kind of doesn't really matter.
You just touched on a really important point. Someone was telling me recently, so we know that the EU AI Act has recently been rolled out, and it's great. There are a level of regulations we do need across the world. But someone was telling me their father was using glasses to help him read, and the EU AI Act actually prohibited from using those glasses because of some of the prohibitions they had put in place. So even at the regulations level, we need to make sure that inclusivity that we were starting to adapt to with the usage of AI is not now impacted negatively by regulations.
It's complex, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But I think those discussions need to be had because it's, again, really important that there is some sort of guidelines globally, regionally, to be able to say, but this is incredible technology that is helping people. I don't know how that is going to be navigated, but it has to be part of the conversation. Exactly.
Yeah. And let's touch a bit on kind of future outlook. What is your vision for the future of AI in creating a more inclusive world, and what gives you hope and what concerns you?
I want people to know that I'm proud of the fact that I have a disability. And, a lot of people say, oh, AI could change things. You could have, it could eliminate disability. It could eliminate all of these things that the world sees as wrong or bad. And I say, I don't want that. I want AI technology to be able to further enhance the abilities and capabilities that I do have. And I don't see my disability as something that is a deterrent. So it's making sure that in these conversations that diversity still exists, because we don't want to eliminate that. We don't want to make everybody the same. We don't want to make assumptions that AI technology is better than what we have, but instead, how can it enhance who we already are? So I never want to have two arms, and I hope that there's nothing in the future, and I'm sure there will be, that allow that as an option. And maybe that's what it comes down to. The choice is there, the option is there, but for also having the conversation to know that I'm actually okay with how this technology is helping me with one arm, and that I don't want to be somebody without a disability. I think that's quite an alarming conversation when people are sort of a bit taken aback that why would you want to have a disability? My disability has opened so many incredible doors for me. It's given me a different perspective on how I view the world, a deeper level of empathy and understanding for people. And so I'm so fortunate to have that. And I definitely want to be able to use AI to enhance what I already have. And wouldn't it be amazing if in the future, people like me and technology like this allowed us to delve into a world where it's like a superpower, a superhuman with a disability. And so that's what I hope for the future.
Amazing. And just as we go to wrap up, where's Jessica going next? We've done the London Marathon. We've got the New York Marathon coming up.
I know running is kind of like my therapy. So for the listeners, I used to represent Australia in the sport of swimming. And after I had my children, I was kind of looking for a new goals. For me, it's always about pushing my boundaries physically, using sport as a platform to also tell my story. Now I just run because it just gives me peace of mind. But yes, I have New York Marathon coming up. So that's what I'm training for. And again, for me, it's showcasing to the world what I can do rather than being limited by the assumption of others about what they think I can't do.
Yeah. Is there a new book on the horizon?
I'm drafting something at the moment that obviously includes this incredible technology based on the demand from the kids when I visit the schools.
Yeah.
So we want to see the arm. And the
That's
stories.
brilliant. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you've given us such huge insights on how AI can help assistive technology, but also just the caution of what we need to look for and be careful for in the future. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode of AI Trust Talks. I hope this conversation has sparked new insights and empowered you to think critically about the role of AI in our lives. Together, we have the power to shape the future where technology serves humanity responsibly and ethically. If you have found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, share, and join the conversation. Your voice matters in building a trusted AI future. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and let's keep building trust in technology, one conversation at a time.